Mrs. Louisa Perry is senior partner at Korn, Ferry. With over 20 years of work experience, she's going to give you some tips on how to climb the corporate ladder. Please put your hands together for Mrs. Louisa Perry.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? That's a shame. Don't expect great things. Yes, I'm Louisa Perry, and I work for the firm Korn Ferry. We are an executive search firm, and I don't know how many of you in the room know what that is, but effectively we find people and we hire people for organizations. We're also the world's leader in assessment talent services as well. So why have I been invited here today to talk to you? I suppose there's two reasons. Firstly, I've spent over 20 years hiring senior professionals for organizations, and so hopefully have some idea by now some of the things they're looking for when making those hiring decisions. And secondly, the person who was supposed to be standing here today are double booked and is in Paris. So go easy on me, I haven't had much time to prepare. Okay, so what is it that we do when we're assessing individuals and looking for traits? I've been asked to speak about the traits that are central to, in terms of identification, when finding people for roles and moving them through an organization. So how do we actually do that? Well, if I look at my job, I'm invited in to speak to any number of individuals. Usually they're senior leaders, so they might be the CEO, the CFO, or part of the leadership team, maybe an HR director. And those individuals will sit within a number of different firms in different sectors. So it might be a global consumer organization, or a professional services firm, or a large retailer. And I will go and talk to those individuals and help them to define a brief of what they're looking for. Now, what often happens when we go and see these people is that the very busy and important CEO will say to me, I have a number of things I'm looking for, and this is my checklist, and I need someone who's got gravitas and can manage large operations and large numbers of people. And it's our role as consultants and as a search executive to help tailor their expectations. And to do that, we need to go back to the beginning and understand what is the brief based on the responsibilities for that role and the duties that an individual will perform. So you're trying to get a sense of what the day job is before you actually look at the skills that are required. So, for example, I focus on IT directors and CIOs. If I'm taking a brief around that, I will ask the client to define what it is that they do, and then we'll work together to find the skills. Hold on. So that was the title. So you've got 4 key areas that we look at when assessing individuals. If you look at the first, I don't know if this has got a pointer. I'm not going to try and press it in case I turn it off. But the first 2, competencies and experience. Your competencies are the skills and behaviors required for success that can be observed. So these might include a number of different areas. They may be decision-making, or your ability to be strategic, or courageous. Perhaps the role requires some of those skills. And in looking at an individual, we will ask questions around their competency in performing a task, and we will rate that individual accordingly. In the second box, in the purple, we have experience. And this is probably something you're all more familiar with. So what is it you actually need to do to be able to perform the role? And in this area, it probably comes as no surprise, but if you're 20, 30 years into your career and you're being asked to perform the role of, for example, an IT director, you're likely to have done a similar role before. So you've probably managed a large operation or numbers of people or budgets, or you've outsourced part of that organization. So here we'll be looking for proven experience that they've actually delivered in that area of experience. In those first 2 boxes, it is what you do. So it is what you do on a daily basis. It is what you do before you join a firm that you've exampled that will make you effective in that role. And these things are more relatively easy to understand because usually they're proven. For you people sitting in the room, you'll be joining an organisation often without lots of proven experience. So here you will need to think about how do you demonstrate that you could do those things. And it's to the bottom two categories that we'll look now. So this is who you are. If we look at the drivers for who you are, this might be you had a father that was put a lot of pressure on you and wanted you to go off and be a doctor. Or it might be that you want to feel powerful because you had a sibling that was perhaps a little more strong than you when you were growing up. But whatever the drivers are, they're likely to have an effect on the way you behave for the rest of your career and also in your personal life. And it is those drivers, if we can identify what they are and whether they're likely to be affected in the workplace, that will have a key influence on whether we think you're going to be right and fit for that organisation and that role. And the area that I've been asked to talk about, traits. So traits are your inclinations and natural tendencies of a person to lean towards, I suppose, performing a behaviour. And how do we identify those? I can't necessarily identify them by looking at you, so how am I going to work out what they are? Well, just to take one step back from that, why am I in a position where I can tell you that? Yes, I have personal experience of looking at the traits of an individual, and I'm probably quite guttural in my experience and making decisions. But if you look to the right-hand area here, I work for a firm who've had 5 decades of assessing individuals. We have now placed more CEOs, so the Chief Executive Officer in firms more than any other firm in the world. And we have assessed those individuals, of which there have been 7 million executives, around their competencies, their experience, their decision-making, and their traits. And within that population, we've looked at 2.5 million assessments. Now, that is a lot of data. And if you add all of that up and you get the clever psychologists in and data analysts and people to look at that information, they will then give us a view on what those core traits will be in your executive team. And 3 key areas come out. One is around your agility. So that's your ability to adapt. There is one thing, nothing more certain than the fact that your business and your personal lives will change. Get used to it, thrive in it, like it. If you don't, it has a detrimental effect. And also detrimental effects can be positive in terms of the outcome too. But it will change. And what we look for in individuals is the ability to adapt within certain environments. How can that be demonstrated? You might be looking for someone who's steeped in a retail background, but if they've also worked in a very different background and been successful, that might demonstrate to me that they've been able to do something somewhere else. It's also about, it's not just your ability to adapt, it's your ability to take on the pace of an organisation. So can you flex your style based on whether you're working maybe in a public sector environment that perhaps moves at a little bit more slow pace versus something that's very, very fast moving. The other area that you would need to be effective in is social leadership. And to give you a sense of that, you need to influence. I'm sure there are roles where, perhaps more scientific roles, where you're in a lab looking at a petri dish, but even then, I'm sure you're having to influence the other lab managers in the role that you do. The people that you influence, whether that's your senior stakeholders, and these might be people that you may need to go and see in a boardroom and affect, you might be part of that boardroom at some point, and will need to engage in robust discussion to find successful outcomes. You might also need to find third parties to partner up with, whether that's an executive search firm or an offshore India firm that's going to manage your tea. Whatever it might be, you've got to source those individuals, identify who's right, and manage relationships. And that will come down to your interpersonal skills. Your peers, you're doing that already. You're working out, you've got people that you like in this room, people you don't, but you still have to navigate a way through working with those you don't work as easily with. And some of you will move into team management. And this is clearly an area where you also need to influence those individuals. I suppose the last point on social leadership is around working within an international context. Increasingly, firms are becoming global. The world is becoming smaller, and therefore you're not only working relationships that have different time zones, different cultures. I mean, just within Europe, with the complexity of dealing with the French versus the Germans versus the Brits is enormous, and the geography of that is actually very small. But a lot of you will now move into careers and jobs where you are looking internationally, and you have to navigate that. So your social ability to work within that context, Your empathy and your ability to build relationships is central to your success. Whether you're highly scientific or pointy-headed or whatever it might be, there is no getting away from that. And the last trait which is central will be your energy. And energy is a title that encompasses several areas, but really it's your ability to persuade and continue persisting and never give up. And I can't think of any individuals that I've either worked with or admired who haven't been through tough times. And it is your ability to come through those, learn, and make, I suppose, inroads into moving forward. When we become frightened, or we've been bruised, or we're rejected, there is a natural Darwinian sense of shutting the door and not exposing oneself again to that sort of thing. Much how I feel today. Why would I public speak by choice? But sometimes you do these things because you have to. So I think those are the three key areas. If we just go on to... So you get hired for what you know. So that was the first two boxes, around the competencies and the experience, primarily. And you get fired for who you are. So think about that. If you're going to interviews, it's not just about getting the job, it's once you're in situ, and it's how you'll act. And it's those three key areas that will, I suppose, predicate whether you're successful or not in the long term. They've done a number of studies, and they've looked at the profiles of the key leaders in organizations, and the CEO has a number of common traits, which are... So here you can see, I don't know if you can all see that at the back, but the top line is the CEO, and the bottom line is a first-level leader. And you can see the differential relatively between the two. And if you look at some of the traits down here, influence, we talked about social leadership. Your ability to influence is central. Some of the difficulties I have in the CIO community is that these people are boffins by nature often. Highly intellectual, great cerebral cortexes. They understand how technology worked. They often started as coders and developers and then built their way up through the organizations. But once they start to interact with the board and the CFO and the CEO and the other leadership team, they struggle to communicate and get their point across and navigate and be discussive in nature. So you can't get away from your ability to need to communicate, and it's how you do that. I'm not going to go through each of these, but there are some key ones. Having vision, thought focus, are you organized? Self-awareness is a very key one. I'm always astounded by the lack of self-awareness when I tell an IT director the reason he's not sitting on the board is because he doesn't communicate, or she. I perhaps don't put that in a blunt fashion, but all the same, that is often the reason that they don't hit that senior level of leadership. Stress tolerance. Again, can you look calm under pressure? You might be feeling very stressed, but can you be observably not stressed? And interestingly, if you look at the last point, attention to detail, you can see there that the CEO scores relatively low in attention to detail, and the first-level leaders score relatively high. So it's probably important for you all in the room today to be thinking about the detail, but perhaps when you've got the bigger umbrella view of what you're trying to achieve, there's less need to do so. It bodes well for me being a very good CEO, should I ever get near that. I have no attention to detail. I think just a couple of other points outside of some of the stats and the literature and all the wealth of information we now have at our fingertips to be able to share with you, and that's just by being a bit older than you. So what do I think some of the key things which would be helpful in terms of building your career and getting on? Build your network. And I don't mean to do that in a sort of Machiavellian way, but your social network and the people you get on with at work and your clients and those that you interact with, they will likely stay with you for a long time. And it's those relationships that are often fundamental to your success, either because you've worked with someone, they've moved firm and they want to bring you with you, or they're a client you've worked with historically, maybe 10 years ago, and they want to work with you again. Maybe they were a candidate of mine, and they had a great experience. And I may never get any work from them, but I might at some point. But I think build relationships is quite central to success at a senior level. Find a mentor. That doesn't have to be something that's fixed or rigid, although that would be great. It doesn't have to be a life coach, but if you find one, perfect. But find people you trust. If you're just reliant on your own views, then it's just one view. The more that you share and ask questions and show vulnerability, the more you're likely to learn. And the final 2 points there I'd also like to raise are authenticity. I think certainly starting out in our careers, there's a sense of must do that, must climb the corporate ladder, must be that, must be better than my friend, must earn more than my sister, whatever it might be. If those are the drivers, they might help you excel down a certain path. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happy or find long-term success. You'll meet a lot of people of my age, 22, in case you were wondering, who are, I'm not sure what the ripples of laughter were, coughs down here. But there's a lot of people that will get to a certain point in their career and find that they're not happy. And that's usually because they haven't been authentic and really true to themselves. If you think about what it is that you enjoy doing, genuinely, what do you enjoy doing? Do you like walking the dog? Do you like painting, fixing things? Do you really like reading books? You know, the problem with a lot of starting out on your career is you tend to fall into things, so there's a bit of trial and error, which is all great, but think about what you actually like. And if you're able to capture that, and not many of us are, but if you can think about that early on and get some of that right, you're likely to be not only authentic and true to yourself, but therefore more happy and therefore more successful. But you can ask a question because you're so polite.
Thank you. So would you recommend that maybe we start out in one of these corporate jobs to save money and thanks. Okay. So would you basically recommend what you're recommending to us? What I'm hearing from you is that we should take one of these corporate jobs at the beginning just to get to know ourselves better, what we like better, and then save up enough so we can maybe start our own dog walking company or something like that.
I think that's an almost impossible question to answer because it depends, but I would say no. If you want a black or white answer, the answer is no. Okay. Do something that excites you. You have one life. Do something. However, if your need is that you need to earn money more than you need to feel fulfilled in your job on a day-to-day basis, that's the driving factor. But if you find something you like and you're passionate about, that is the journey you should go on, in my opinion. I mean, if I take my own example, I must be on my 4th midlife crisis. I do have my 2nd pair of drums that I'm still yet to play. Long story. But around the age of 30, I did lie earlier, I decided that I must do something more with my life. I'd already worked in this career very successfully. I was earning more money than most of my peers, and the trajectory was great. And I woke up on New Year's Day, and I thought, must learn French, maybe pottery, do something else. It can't just be about earning the buck. Anyway, I looked into a few courses. I had a bad back, and I thought, my osteopath has a lot of fun. You know, he's working in Harley Street, and you know, he seems to have a lot of prestige, and he travels the world. I thought there can't be much to that. It's just, you know, clicking a few backs. And anyway, I looked into it more and more, and as a result of that, I ended up giving up my career and doing a 4-year full-time degree. You learn effectively the anatomy and physiology that a doctor does. It's very intensive, and I loved the training. The training was brilliant, and it was 4 years, and I had no income. So I must have really liked it, right? I came out, I thought I was going to set up the Perry Institute. I'd start the hub in London, have a San Fran site, San Diego maybe, and then we'd go over to Sydney. I set up in Putney and Wimbledon Village, and I hated the job. And I did it for 7 months. And the reason it didn't suit me is because there wasn't the same pressures and there wasn't the same deals. And I thought walking my dogs in between patients was the perfect life. I was bored. I thought I was going to cure cancer. I was rubbing Mrs. Miggins' knee and helping her ligament ailment. Thankfully, my old employer was very keen to get me back. He was starting up a firm, and once I got back into it, I loved it. Now, I have no regrets about that part of my life, and I learned a huge amount, and it was fantastic. So never be afraid to try things, but perhaps be a little bit more considered than I was, maybe, but certainly do something you love. And there's something about the role that I currently do, which I do love. So that's a small anecdote there. And the final piece I would say to you is around confidence. I know a lot of talented people, and I know in myself that when I've been, the more confident I am, the more successful I am. It's hard just to take a pill for confidence. You will build confidence if you're good at something, and you'll likely be good at something if you like it. So please come back to what do I want to do with my life? You don't have to answer that question, but you have to have something in here which tells you what you might enjoy. Finally, you'll be glad to hear. So I'm not going to go through this list specifically, but I think just reflect on some of the things that I've spoken about today. On the first bullet point, if you lack self-awareness, you'll struggle to grow and develop. Ask your friends. Ask your peers, what am I like? How do I come across? If 3 or 4 people tell you, you sound quite angry, you probably are, whether you think you are or not. And all these things will have an influence in the workplace. So be self-aware, and that self-awareness may not be natural for you, so ask questions of others and think about the perception you're having. And if you keep trying something and it doesn't work, why doesn't it work? And you need to reflect on that and not be afraid to change and take critique. Those who are not agile learners won't take away valuable lessons from their experiences. Well, we can't all be very rapid learners, but don't be afraid to learn. And again, come back to the don't be afraid to make mistakes. And the experience piece. And I'm sorry to sound old school, I never thought I would, but there is a sense these days of I've kind of earned my right rather than working hard to get there. You're not going to walk in and be given the golden key or the seat at the top table. You have to prove yourself, and you have to work hard for that, and there really isn't any other way around it. The more talented you are, you could argue, the less you'll want to work. But if you don't want to work as much, the energy's not there, the passion, you won't ingratiate those around you. So there's lots of factors to being successful and lots of traits, but I can guarantee those traits are more likely to express themselves if you are who you want to be and be authentic. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you.